thank you very much for joining us and parting with some of your wisdom. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Great. We'll just share the screen. Thank you, Hanro. Okay, super. So my consultancy is called CURIOSITAS, which means curious in Latin. And essentially I named it that because I focus on two things. One is visitor attractions. And so we bring curios or memories back from the attractions that we visit. And then if I look forward into the future, I did a master's in futures thinking. We bring curios or artifacts back from the future to try and understand them today to see where trends are going. And I'll talk more about that later. Yeah, let me just see if I can forward this. Okay, now I can, right, let's see. No, it's not forwarding. Maybe, Nico, you can just forward for me. One slide. Ah, okay, yeah, thanks. So that's me in summer and a sunny day when I'm dressed a little bit brighter. You can follow me on Twitter at CityBallKid or have a look at my website, curiositas.co.za. And as Hanro said, I'm an attraction specialist with 25 years experience. I do a lot of work consulting for feasibility study for new attractions, improving on attractions, finding ways to get greater ticketing income, and also started the African Association of Visitor Experiences and Attractions. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Let me try and move this myself again. No, won't let me do it. So Hanro, it's going to, Nico, it's going to be you. There you go. So, you know, there are less and less reasons to leave home. And this was the case even pre-pandemic. Research had shown that people were spending more on in-home entertainment than out-of-home entertainment, more time and more money. And more importantly, next slide, we have invested in our in-home entertainment. So this makes the in-home entertainment a little bit sticky because you've invested in cocooning, in home basing, bunkering, nesting. The Swedish word is hygge, which means warm and comfy. And you can see that even pre-pandemic, the percentage of American population that prefers to stay at home during the weekend has been increasing over the last decade. Now, the pandemic only accelerated this. And whilst I do think we are looking for reasons to leave the home, and we'll talk about that later, as I said, we've also invested very much in sticky behavior at home. And by sticky behavior, I mean literally investing in time and money into making your home a place of entertainment and a place of fun. We've invested in Netflix, we've invested in online courses, we've invested in figuring out how to get meals delivered and food delivered from Woolies. We've invested in home gyms or virtual apps to do yoga at home. Of course, we're all working from home, so that's even less of a reason to leave home. And we entertain at home, and that includes entertaining family and friends. In the past, maybe we went out more to restaurants. So those are all reasons why people are not only stuck at home, but invested in being the home. And we've got to try to find ways to make it comfortable for them to leave the home.
Sabina, can you try and click with your mouse here at the bottom,
okay,
the arrow, and see if that works?
Okay. No.
Awesome.
There we go. Okay, wait.
Cool.
So all is not lost. The top emotional drivers for leaving home. Hang on. Oops, now it's going too fast. Now it's, hang on. Sorry guys, let me just find my slide. Why is it not going back? Weird. There we go. The top emotional drivers for leaving home, which was done in a study in the USA recently, people said they were going to leave home in order to have fun together. So the issue is fun and together. The other thing is that people are wanting a unique experience that is out of the ordinary. So it's an experience that you can't get at home, something that involves all 5 senses, and quite importantly, something that usually creates an emotional connection, because on-screen and virtual doesn't raise the emotions as much as real-life experiences, and neither does it speak to your senses. And the third reason to leave home is really something that's entertaining for both adults and children. Again, very important, adults and children. So we are really in competition for people's time, attention, and discretionary spend. And believe it or not, the least of these is discretionary spend. If what you offer is of value for people's time and for their attention, and particularly for the entire family, you will find that they will find the discretionary spend, because remember, people are leaving home less. So they are choosing to spend more in a more directed way. And when they leave home, they usually have a budget in their pocket. And what we have found, certainly for attractions that have opened in Europe, is that whilst there are fewer visitor numbers, the discretionary spend or the secondary spend on site is higher than it was pre-pandemic, because people have decided this is a day out that they're doing. Now I've lost the little, there we go, okay. So I myself happened to visit Tshwane. It was in about May. That's myself and my niece. We visited my mother-in-law, and she's based in Krugersdorp. And I said to her, we never go anywhere when I come. I don't want to be stuck in Krugersdorp. I want to do something in Pretoria. And in particular, I wanted to see the Javid UP Museum, because I'm really into art. So we overnighted in Pretoria, and we decided to go see the Javid. We had a wonderful time, but that was only a 1-hour experience. I then actually had the rest of the day to complete. I didn't want to go back yet. And it was incredibly hard to find information as to what to do next. There was very little guidance. If you're interested in art, because I've been to the Javid, where else would you want to go? And a lot of the places were obviously closed, to be expected. And then, I don't know Tshwane at all. So I didn't know where are the restaurants, because I don't want to eat in a mall. I actually had to WhatsApp a friend of mine in France to say, you were in Pretoria recently, where is the restaurant street that I can go to? And I think she directed me to, is it called Hazelwood? Something like that. And so I drove up and down there and found a restaurant. Then we just drove into the center of town, and we Googled on the way, what can we see? We found the Pretoria Art Museum. We took a chance, found our way there. It's quite fenced in, and that fence itself was actually closed. So we didn't know if it was open or not. I had to hop out the car. I had to ask the guy at the gate, are you open? Yes, he was. And he opened the fence, and we could drive. That was another 1-hour experience. And I actually found it very charming. The art in there is amazing. It's a little bit run down. But by now we still hadn't had a coffee. Where can I have a coffee? I asked the guy there. He couldn't direct me anywhere. There was no coffee in the complex itself. We drove around a bit again. We had to look for parking. We had coffee. Then we Googled on our phones. Remember, everything is done on your phones, right? So if you're not available or easy to download on your phone, people aren't going to find you. So then we said, right, let's just go to the Union buildings. So we went and have a look there. Again, there's no coffee. So, by now we were starting to get hungry. Where can we go and eat? Okay, we found our way to that street in Pretoria with a lot of restaurants. Then we Googled some more. I couldn't see whether Freedom Park was open or not. I wanted to go. It's a lovely museum, even though it's quite under-visited. So we drove towards Freedom Park, then saw the outline of the Voortrekker Monument and said, well, let's swing by and go to the Voortrekker Monument, which was a wonderful experience. And we ended up having some coffee in their little coffee shop. I bought something in the retail. I bought some rooibos tea, and eventually we took ourselves home. But I can tell you that it was a lot of hard work. And I think if I didn't have my co-driver, my niece, with me to Google and to research while I was driving, I might have given up, quite honestly. So that's the one thing around collaboration, is having more ideas from people as to what to do next at each of those sites would have been useful. So tourism experts are actually fearing quite a long road to recovery. And I know Tshwane is relatively dependent on domestic visitors, first of all within your city, and secondly probably business visitors, which is, I think, actually a good thing. Cape Town is learning a big lesson about having been overly dependent and overly focused on international tourists. The UNWTO, the United Nations World Tourism Organization, and also IATA, the International Airline Association, are both forecasting a return to 2019 levels only towards 2023 or 2024 and later. So that's a long recovery period. And so for those of you that have long relied on the domestic market, you're on better seats, I think, than those that are relying on the international markets, which is great. So attractions are really perfectly placed for the post-lockdown era. I call it the post-lockdown era, not the post-COVID era, because COVID is not going away. Like flu, it'll be with us for many years to come. We will find ways of controlling it. We will find ways of ensuring everyone's vaccinated. But the idea that we perhaps had 18 months ago that there's an end, I think we need to put to bed. It's really a post-lockdown era that we're talking about. And post-lockdown era, people are wanting to get out of the house and to do things. So it might be less often than before, but once they decide to leave, they do so with great intention. They do so with money in their pockets, and they usually do so to socialize. And I'll talk a little bit more about locations-based socialization, which is really where you guys are all based. So it's a big task for us all to think about how we're going to move into this future. And really, my advice to you is start where you are and use what you have. In most cases, we have a lot of underutilized connections and underutilized assets. And we certainly have a lot of domestic market that haven't actually visited our sites before. And it's good news. It means that there is an opportunity to build up from where we are and not have to massively reinvest or rebuild in things from scratch. So the first thing, and this pertains to my day in Tshwane, is you need to make it easy to choose you. I talk about something called the Netflix effect, and that is really almost the dumbing down of entertainment. You lie on the couch, you flick through Netflix, you've paid 100 Rand a month for it. It's got whatever you want. Your son or your grandmother on a different room watching on the same account, watching what they want to watch. If you don't like something, the switch out effect is really cheap. You just switch over to something else. There's no negotiation around where you want to go, around which movies you want to watch, because all three of you can watch separate movies. There's no collaboration around what time to leave, how much petrol money there is, parking money, what you want to do. It's incredibly easy. So you need to think about the fact that your sites, if you're looking for someone's attention, is actually vying for that ease of use. And let me tell you, the ease of use that I felt when I went to Tshwane was not easy at all. The switch out effect is expensive. So if you go to a museum and you decide you don't like it, it's expensive to make another choice. I had to research really hard. Where is a coffee shop? Where is a restaurant? What can I do next? How can I fill my whole day? So in making it easy to choose you, you need to focus on not just your own site, but those around you, and really to create a community. Whether it's a beautiful park that's down the road where someone can take a picnic with them, whether it's a coffee cart from the coffee shop that's around the block, or a voucher at your site that gives people 10% off at the coffee shop, or just sends people there, something that makes it easier for people to make their choices, because we have decision fatigue. And if you, again, compared with how many decisions you have to make when you're watching Netflix, which is basically zero, that's really what you're up against. So in making it easy to choose you, you really need to engage with social media in all its forms. And I'm finding that the social media accounts of visitor attractions are often not engaging enough. So remember, there's more than just Twitter and Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook. There's also TikTok. It was the biggest and most downloaded app of 2020. And it's certainly where the younger generation are. I follow the National Cowboy Museum in, I don't know, Tennessee. And I followed it because they did such an interesting thing. They got their head of security to take over their Instagram account or their Twitter account, both, I think. It all started on March the 17th, just as shutdown started, because he was the only frontline worker that was still allowed to work. And he started off his account saying, "Hello, my name is Tim, and I'm head of security for the Cowboy Museum. I've been asked to take on the additional duty of social media management while the museum is closed. I'm new to this, but excited. My team will also continue to protect and monitor the museum. Thanks, Tim Send." Now, behind the scenes, this account was co-managed by the marketing team of the Cowboy Museum. But they let this chap be the voice. And the voice that he presented, and it's worth going to have a look what they've done. There's a couple of case studies. I mean, he increased the following from I think 1,000 followers up to something like 300,000 followers, partly because he sort of made mistakes on purpose. He was really honest. He gave behind the scenes information about objects that people weren't usually interested in. And he just presented a very accessible, interesting voice for the museum. And they have seen massive, massive online following, but also visitations now that the museum is open, because he became this wonderful, authentic voice of the museum. So really, I want you to think about what strange objects could you feature in your museum? Something interesting, something different. How can you connect with what's going on around you? So if it's World Cat Day, I mean, does your site have a stray cat that you feed and follow? Is there a picture of a cat in your museum collection that you might want to share? Create a virtual community. So often I find attractions and domestic tourism sites, they don't follow each other, because that's how I find other things. If I was on the page for Jab It Up, I would have been following what they're doing and seeing if there was a coffee shop close by that they maybe connect with every day. You know, maybe the curator says, I start my day with a coffee from Vida, and it's only because it's only around the corner. That would have sent a message to me. Then it's also important to have a content pillar. So you have one little simple main message, or a fun idea, or an authentic voice, or an authentic topic that is a little bit of a filter that you talk about once or twice a week. In this case, it was the head of security. It was his voice that was the content pillar. And then, of course, be visual. So the world has moved into a very visual way of consuming content. And hence, it's not only posting pictures, but posting very well curated pictures with great imagery that's interesting, that's different, that then encourages people to take the same picture themselves. They want to go stand in that spot, the one content pic that perhaps you always take of the perfect view. In Cape Town, we've got those yellow frames, and that's all it does is kind of hone people into the idea that this is a place to stop and take a picture and have a view. Please don't do a yellow frame. They've been done to death. I'm sure you can think of something else. The next thing is to curate the pace of your site. So you know your site, and you know your region or your area, your street, your neighborhood better than anybody else. And really, it's a case of guiding people to have the very best experience on your site and in your neighborhood. They don't know it. They don't know how fast to go through. They don't know where to go for parking, for the coffee, for a great little corner shop that sells interesting locally made items. You know, this is something that you can help curate for people so they can pace themselves. Because if they get too tired, they will leave early. If they get bored and they don't have the coffee just when you need the coffee fix, or the cool drink because it's a hot day, they will also leave and go somewhere else. So you need to take ownership not only of your own site, but I would say of your community and your neighborhood, so that you can help your guests curate their day fully. You know, the one thing to think about is that when a guest leaves home, they're looking really for a half-day experience or a full-day experience. And if your site only offers a 1 hour experience, that's okay. Jab It Up, Wits Art Museum, it's about a 1 hour experience. But what was lacking is where to next. I have half a day to spend. Where can I spend that time? Give me some information, give me some ideas, some options, because I then judge the way that I left home and the time and money I spent by driving all the way to Tshwane on the entire morning. I don't judge it just on the 1 hour, even though that was my original intention. Then the other thing is to track mega trends and not buzzwords. So what I mean by this is that buzzwords are really fashion or short trends that, you know, last for the next year or two. You need to invest in longer term trends, and that we call them mega trends that are really driving the experience economy. So the first one of that is demography. And in South Africa, we have a very, very young population. We are the youngest continent, and South Africa has, as for the rest of Africa, has a very young population. It's very different to Europe, where when I talk about demography in Europe, I talk about speaking to an older demographic. So here we have a young demographic. It means they've got young children, hence the focus on family entertainment. Young people, you know, value, for example, food and beverage as part of their experience a lot more than older people. Focus on hyperlocal, and this has only been accelerated during COVID, where people have literally become hyperlocal to the extent that they're just in their lounge. But very much more involved in their neighborhoods, very much more involved in their cities because you can't travel as easily. So focusing on what makes your region, your community different to everybody else. So why come to this part of Tshwane and not another part of Tshwane? What is there for me to discover? And malls, for example, are not a hyperlocal experience. They are the same everywhere. They all look the same. So being outside of a mall is a very important differentiator for you. The experience economy, I will talk about that a little bit more later. Really, people are investing in experiences and not goods anymore, and we'll talk about that later. The transformation economy is an investment that people are doing now into personal transformation. So this comes both in the form of health and well-being, it comes in the form of education, it comes in the form of transforming the relationship with your friends and family. So having a day out with them is a real investment in those personal relationships that have all been suffering during COVID. And people really are prepared to invest in that. Health and well-being, as I've mentioned, is an investment in your mental well-being, and we know that a visitor attraction in any shape or form is an investment in mental health, mental well-being. It's getting outside of the house, it's trying something new, it's finding space to connect with others, to connect with yourselves. So again, visitor attractions are really well placed for this. Then there's tech dependency. So in the past, I said there was a space for people to provide low tech or no tech, as people wanted to leave tech behind and get their kids off their devices. Now I think that's actually changed. People are so connected with their devices. I mean, I needed to, find my way around Tshwane in terms of directions. I needed to find what's open and closed. I use it for payment. Really, everything is done on your phone, and you need to make sure that you are reaching people through all those methods that you can. And finally, there's location-based socialization. So what has changed is pre-COVID, of course, we should socialize outside of the home, but we also very much socialize inside the home. And I'm sure you've noticed now that when people can, they say, let's meet somewhere, let's go do something. Just yesterday, a colleague said to me, she lives 14 kilometers outside of town in Claremont, and she said, I need to get out of my suburb. Let's meet in town. Let's meet somewhere where we can have a coffee and perhaps do something together, go to a museum or something. And then it's a work meeting, but we're doing it through meeting at a location. Now I don't know what's going on here. Okay, there we go. So those are the trends to look out for. Another big trend that's been accelerated through COVID is actually fun. People have had a terrible 18 months, we all have. Mental health is an issue we're all dealing with, whether it's severe mental health or just low affect, slightly lack of energy, lack of new ideas, lack of interest, just basically lack of fun. I'm certainly feeling that way. And the USA Toy Association did some research earlier this year and found that the toys that are selling the most are ones that encourage people to rediscover play. Toys that are not just for kids, in other words, adult toys. Puzzles were a huge seller, as were other new inventive adult toys. Toys or games that include music, and this was very much driven by the TikTok revolution. And then what they called sensational toys. So these were toys or games that helped people connect with themselves, help people slow down, basically fed into people's need for mental health. And what I thought around this is really it's the same need that people have when they leave home to visit an attraction, is they are wanting to rediscover these same things. If they're investing in these toys to play at home with these themes, we know that they will invest in visitor experiences and attractions outside of the home with these themes. So of course, all the while, support the fun, don't spoil the fun. Your COVID protocols need to be in place. I don't need to talk about that, but they can be done in a fun manner. They do not need to be done in the sort of instructive transactional manner. There are ways of sharing information and reminding people to keep their distance, to keep their masks on in a way that's in theme for your site, and that's quite fun. So find a mascot and use that mascot throughout your site. So the most important thing here is that don't deliver a product, but deliver an experience. Basically, we are all discovering new ways of being and not new ways of buying. And researchers found that people are saying happiness is no longer focused on possessions, but by creating, sharing, and capturing experiences. So in the past, it was very well known, you saw on Instagram, people would open packages of things that they've bought and share and show things that they have bought just 3 or 4 years ago. But possessions are no longer being shared on social media. People are sharing where they've been, they're sharing who they're with, and they're sharing experiences. And it has become the new way to invest in yourself. They have really become a meaningful part of our identity. And part of the reason for this really is that an experience has a very long-lasting tail of happiness that it creates. When you buy a commodity, a good, whether it's a new computer or a piece of jewelry or a new pair of shoes, research has shown that the happiness created around that and the serotonin released is very short-lived. It's really in the moment of buying, the moment of unpackaging, and the moment of wearing it for the first time. But after that, there's wear and tear, and there are newer shoes and better shoes and more expensive shoes. And so the happiness index related with the object actually decreases quite quickly. What they have found with experiences is that the opposite. First of all, in the run-up to deciding on having an experience, there's a great amount of happiness and fun in saying, should we do X or should we do Y? Do you want to go quad biking? Do you want to go abseiling? Do you want to go to a museum? And discussing the fun that you're going to have and making those plans creates a great amount of happiness. Then, of course, having the experience itself creates a great amount of happiness. More importantly, afterwards, there's a long tail of happiness related to experiences as you share memories. A year later, Google Photos or whatever brings up, Facebook memories, brings up those memories. And how often do we reshare them? Look what we did a year ago. So it has a very, very long tail. We don't share a year ago, I bought this pair of shoes. We share a year ago, this is what I did with my family and look how much fun I had. And that's all marketing and all adds value to the experience that you give. In these COVID times, they've proven that experiences foster social relationships. Again, in the group that's traveling, also social relationships between your site and the group. So don't think that once they've left you, it's over. Remember, they will be sharing your memories probably a year later when those memories come up again. And it also fosters relationships within the little community of where you're situated. So within that new neighborhood that you've discovered. So all of these things form part of the tools you have to capture the consumer's, and I say this again, time, attention, and discretionary spend. And you really do need to think of all three. When you're asking people to leave home, you're asking them to invest in a lot of time. You think of your site as a 1-hour experience or 3-hour experience, but it's the time taken to travel there, it's the time taken to park, it's the time taken to pick up a picnic on the way. All of those things are part of the experience, and all of them need to be packaged in a way that creates the perfect day out for that family. And that's where the collaboration with each other is really so important. So it's also important to design the sweet spot. So the richest experiences cover all 4 experience realms, and that's really entertainment, aesthetic, educational, and the active. And again, I would encourage you when you're putting packages together or collaborating or thinking about who you can work for in your neighborhood, is to look at, first of all, your site in terms of, does it have all these 4 sweet spots? So does it offer something educational? Does it offer something to do? Is it a beautiful surrounding that speaks to our mental health needs of calmness and quietness and aesthetic beauty? And is it fun? Is it something to enjoy? And not all sites are able to offer all 4, but you will be able to collaborate with somebody in your neighborhood to say, you've learned something at this museum, now go across the road to this park to let your kids run around and expend some energy, because the park is also a very beautiful place, and perhaps around the corner, there's a coffee that you can have. So you're curating this day out for everybody and keeping them in your neighborhood and keeping the spend close. It's really important to consider secondary spend, first of all, for your own site, and again, for your greater community within the Tshwane Tourism Association. So we are busy doing the first ever benchmark study of visitor attractions in South Africa. And it is very surprising to me how few people are sufficiently engaged with the concept of secondary spend and sufficiently engaged with maximizing it. The biggest cost to you is getting people into your site, getting their attention, getting their commitment to the time to come to you. That is the most difficult part of your job. Once they are in the door, you need to now find ways that they spend as much time and money with you. And I always say time and money, because remember, the more time they spend with you, the greater the the value they perceive. So if they've spent 100 Rand, but it's a 1-hour experience, well, then the experience is worth 100 Rand. But if you've encouraged them to stay longer because they've had a coffee, in their heads, it's now a 1.5-hour experience for 100 Rand, which feels cheaper. So there is a close relationship between dwell time on site and the value for money that people perceive your site to have. And so too few places offer the opportunity for a secondary spend. And ideally, you're looking for something that's unique just to yourself. And again, if you can't offer it, collaborate with somebody in your neighborhood. You know, is there a little baker around the corner that can do biscuits in the shape of the Voortrekker Monument, or biscuits in the shape of the big wheel, something that pertains to you? When I was managing director of the Cableway, we created Dussie-shaped biscuits. These things sold like hotcakes. They were basically shortbreads with icing on, and every single kid that walked in would say, I want a Dussie biscuit, and I'm either going to eat it right here, or I'm going to buy 2 and take one for my friends. So there are a number of ways of creating secondary spend, and not, you know, the average reliance on ticketing income at attractions is around 70% of your income. So you need to find secondary spend at food and beverage and retail. You can create virtual experiences because that also extends the collaboration. Photo memories on site are very, very popular, like you get at Joburg Zoo and at Pretoria Zoo. People want to take home that memory. And again, if you can't offer it, collaborate with your community for secondary spend because they'll be very grateful for the business, and they'll be sharing things your way as well. Then, I've spoken a lot about this, create a local community. You know, fellow colleagues, this is a lonely place that we're all in. We're not able to connect with each other as much as we can. And I think it's really important that we connect with each other as professionals to learn from each other, and that we connect with others in the attractions industry and others within the tourism industry. Because we can always learn from each other. We can jig each other along and cheer each other up. We can share information, and more importantly, we can ensure that our visitors stay within our own ecosystem, because why encourage them to go back to Johannesburg and spend money there when you're trying to get them to spend time and money in Tshwane? So it's the same for visitors. They want to connect with your local community. And if you live in Tshwane on the one side of Tshwane, that doesn't mean you know the community on the other side. So if you've made a trip out, you want really visitors to be able to connect with the full offering of that neighborhood. So again, connect with those in the vicinity, create a virtual community. I talk about the coffee shop effect, and this is the fact really that you will see that coffee shops are always busier, and restaurants, if there are 3 or 4 in a row. A single coffee shop is harder to drive business for. If there's 3 or 4 in a row, you find it creates a vibe, it creates interest. It's a bit like when you are driving along and there's a padstal. One sign isn't enough. You need a whole lot of signs to remind you there's a padstal coming up, stop now, turn left now, one sign and you've driven past. So you really want to create a community so that people, so that again, it's a full curated day out. And it's the same with the cookie crumb effect. It's basically you're leading people with little touch points throughout. And they can be a particular beautiful street to walk between your site and the next, because there is interesting architectural buildings, or it's a very well, easily directed sign. So think about what your community needs and how you can help build that up so that you can all speak to your visitor as a single voice. Then I want you to be honest with yourselves. Why should people actually visit you? And I find often we know our sites really well, but we don't see it through the eyes, of someone who hasn't been there for a long time, someone who's been there recently and ask why would you come again? And why would a repeat, what would you need to create a repeat business? And then speak to people who haven't come. Now, this doesn't have to be a complicated thing. As I said at the Museum Association meeting is, I challenge you to go home and speak to 10 of your family and friends and to say, have you been to X? And if not, why not? And really ask the question and be open-minded. Don't defend the reason, just listen to the reasons, because the information is all there. I see Zeitz saying we have spellbinding stories to tell. And I then want to say, really, because it doesn't look spellbinding when I look at the social media accounts. It's a picture of a dusty object. What would be spellbinding is why this object is important. Someone saying in an interesting voice, I found this really in an interesting discovery of why this object is interesting. Maybe it looks quite boring, but hey, this is why it's actually a first. Again, I see people saying, join us for a fun day out, but just saying it's a fun day out, that's not good enough. Make it a fun day out and make sure that the images you share show fun, show people smiling, show families. And then again, research not only why people visited, that's the easiest one, research why people aren't visiting and ask honestly, and research what people would want to spend on as secondary spend once they've come to see you. So what are locals looking for on a day out? Again, they're looking for value, and the value that they're looking for is time well spent, because memories and experiences are measured in time. They're not measured in money. They're looking for a place to socialize. So locations-based socialization is a massive, massive trend that has been on the go for the last 3 years. It's accelerated with COVID. So places where people can connect with each other. They're looking for a place to have fun. We need some lightheartedness here, even if your site is perhaps a museum or a serious site. There are still ways to have lighthearted fun and for people to breathe. They're looking for personal well-being. That's both in mental health and wellness. They're looking for an emotional connection, and they're looking for a complete out-of-home experience. They're not just looking to go somewhere, do one thing, and return home. They want to come back exhausted, flop on the couch, and say that was a great day out from start to finish. So the important thing really is to get fresh ideas and to upskill yourself, to connect with others and to collaborate with others. Again, you can follow me on City Bulk Kid. You can follow AAVEA, the African Association of Visitor Experiences and Attractions. And I would encourage you to do two things. One is to join our live chats that are once a month. They are for free, and we connect with the industry and we share best practice and case studies, and that's for free for 45 minutes once a month. And we also have a virtual conference coming up on the 19th of August. It's a really, really high quality conference. It's 1 day only, and we have about 4 or 5 international speakers that will be speaking to things that have worked overseas and are definitely on their way here. And I find what we put together is both inspiring, but also very practical and very useful for how we can work together. As I say, start where we are and use what you have. And that's me.
Sabine, thank you very, very much. I think that is so much information. I'm very glad Nicholas recorded this session because I'm going to have to go back a couple of times to go through this. Very, very interesting. I think my attention span, I'm still stuck on slide number 3. I'm going to open the floor for a couple of questions now from anyone, but from me, firstly, I think it was slide number 3. You spoke about the Cape Town that overinvested in the international market versus the domestic market. And I totally agree. And I think Tshwane is maybe not that much, but to a degree as well, depending on your different product. My question to you is, what innovative measures or ways did the product owners in Cape Town, what did they do to change their focus from the international to the domestic market? Not only marketing-wise, but did they do any specials? Did they bring their rates down? Did they what can we do to invest in our domestic market and get our domestic market to start using or investing in our attractions?
Yeah, so I think the answer is they haven't cracked that nut yet. They haven't done that well. They found themselves scrambling because they were overly reliant on the international market. What I can say is when I was the CEO of Table Mountain Cableway, when I took over, I said to the board, we are way too reliant on the international market. It's so many things can happen that dent that market. The drought, Ebola, which affected people wanting to fly to South Africa, volcano ash clouds, and of course now that happens the pandemic. So my big focus at the time was to get a greater balance of domestic visitors. And by the time I left, the Cableway had on average 45% domestic, and in season, in school holidays, it was up to 80% domestic. And some of that was, you know, specials is a difficult thing because it costs money to run our attractions. And if you discount the ticketing price, you know, visitors love it, but the problem is you're left with less of an income. So you need to think that very carefully. There are ways of doing it. So the discounting, I would, and I say caution because each site is different. So I would caution around a blanket discounting of ticketing. I would try and understand where your high demand times are and push into discount in the lower demand times. So for example, at the Cableway,